Picture this. You're holding two coins, one in each hand. You flip them both at exactly the same time, and somehow, impossibly, they always land on opposite sides. Heads and tails, tails and heads every single time. Now imagine separating these coins by thousands of miles. You flip yours in New York, your friend flips theirs in Tokyo, and still, without fail, they land on opposite sides. No signals pass between them. No hidden communication. Yet they're connected in a way that seems to mock everything we think we know about how the world works. This isn't science fiction. This is quantum entanglement. In 1964, a quiet physicist from Northern Ireland named John Stuart Bell wrote down a simple mathematical inequality that would forever change our understanding of reality itself. Bell's theorem didn't just challenge our assumptions about the universe, it shattered them completely. What Bell proved was that the world we live in operates according to principles so strange, so counterintuitive, that even Albert Einstein called them spooky action at a distance and refused to believe they could be true. But here's the thing, Einstein was wrong. Over the past 60 years, experiment after experiment has confirmed what Bell's mathematics predicted. The universe is connected in ways that defy our everyday experience. Particles separated by vast distances can influence each other instantaneously, not through signals, not through forces we can measure, but through something far more mysterious, a connection that exists beyond space and time as we understand them. Today, we're going to dive deep into Bell's quantum theorem and discover how it reveals the most profound truth about our universe, that everything, absolutely everything, is fundamentally interconnected in ways that would have seemed like magic just a century ago. By the time we're done, you'll understand why this discovery didn't just win Nobel Prizes. It launched an entire revolution in physics and technology that's reshaping our world right now. So let's start with the man who made it all possible. John Stuart Bell wasn't trying to revolutionize physics when he walked into his office at CERN in 1964. He was a particle physicist, more interested in the practical problems of high-energy research than the philosophical puzzles that had been nagging at quantum mechanics for decades. But sometimes the most profound discoveries come from the most unexpected places, and sometimes the questions that seem purely philosophical turn out to have very real, very testable answers. Bell had been thinking about something that had bothered physicists since 1935. That year, Albert Einstein and two colleagues, Boris Podolsky and Nathan Rosen, had published a paper that seemed to expose a fatal flaw in quantum mechanics. They called it a paradox, but it was really more of an accusation. Quantum mechanics, they argued, was incomplete. It was missing something crucial about how the world actually works. Here's what troubled them. Quantum mechanics predicted that two particles could become entangled, sharing a connection that persisted even when they were separated by enormous distances. Measure one particle, and you instantly know something about the other, regardless of how far apart they are. Einstein found this deeply disturbing. How could measuring a particle in one location instantly affect a particle somewhere else? What kind of signal could travel faster than light to carry this information? The answer, Einstein believed, was that quantum mechanics was wrong. Not completely wrong, but incomplete. There had to be hidden variables, properties of particles that quantum theory couldn't see but that determined the outcomes of measurements. These hidden variables would explain the apparent connection between distant particles without requiring any spooky action at a distance. The particles weren't really influencing each other across space. They were just following predetermined scripts, like actors in a play who seem to be responding to each other but are really just following their individual cues. For nearly 30 years, this remained a philosophical debate. Einstein and his supporters argued for hidden variables. Quantum mechanics advocates, led by physicists like Niels Bohr, insisted that the theory was complete and that the apparent non-locality was real, but there seemed to be no way to settle the argument experimentally. Both sides could explain the same experimental results using their different interpretations. That's where Bell came in. What he realized was that these weren't just different interpretations of the same phenomena, they were different theories that made different predictions, and different predictions meant the possibility of different experimental outcomes. If he could find the right experiment, he could test which view of reality was actually correct. The key insight was mathematical. Bell showed that if hidden variables were real, if particles had predetermined properties that explained their behavior, then the results of certain measurements would have to satisfy specific mathematical constraints. These constraints became known as Bell inequalities. They set limits on how strongly correlated the measurements of two separated particles could be if the world operated according to classical intuitions about locality and realism. But quantum mechanics predicted correlations that violated these limits, not by a little but by significant, measurable amounts. According to quantum theory, entangled particles could be more strongly correlated than any classical theory would allow. The difference wasn't subtle. It was dramatic enough that a well-designed experiment could easily distinguish between the two possibilities. Bell's theorem was elegantly simple in its implications. Either the quantum mechanical predictions were wrong, or our classical understanding of reality needed a complete overhaul. There was no middle ground, no way to have both local realism and quantum mechanics. One of them had to go. The mathematical beauty of Bell's approach lay in its generality. He wasn't talking about one specific quantum system or one particular type of measurement. His theorem applied to any theory that tried to explain quantum correlations using local hidden variables. No matter how clever or sophisticated such a theory might be, Bell proved that it would always be limited by his inequalities, and quantum mechanics consistently predicted violations of those limits. But proving something mathematically is one thing, testing it experimentally is quite another. Bell's theorem pointed the way toward a crucial experiment, but actually performing that experiment would require pushing the boundaries of what was technically possible in the laboratory. The challenge was formidable. You needed pairs of entangled particles. You needed to measure their properties with incredible precision. You needed to ensure that the measurements were made simultaneously, or at least close enough to simultaneously, that no signal traveling at the speed of light could connect them. And you needed to do all of this while maintaining the delicate quantum states that made entanglement possible in the first place. In the early 1970s, technology was barely up to the task. Lasers were still relatively new. Photodetectors were crude and inefficient. Computer-controlled timing systems were primitive by today's standards, but the theoretical stakes were so high that experimentalists were willing to push their equipment to the absolute limits. The first serious attempt came in 1972, when John Clauser and Stuart Freedman set up an experiment at the University of California, Berkeley. They used excited calcium atoms to produce pairs of entangled photons, particles of light that shared a quantum connection. These photons traveled to separate detectors, where their polarizations were measured. Polarization is a property of light that describes the orientation of its electric field. In classical physics, each photon would have a definite polarization from the moment it was created. But in quantum mechanics, entangled photons exist in a superposition of polarization states until they're measured. Clauser and Freedman's setup allowed them to test Bell's inequality directly. They measured correlations between the polarizations of photons detected at different orientations and compared these correlations to the limits set by Bell's theorem. The results were clear. The correlations violated Bell's inequality just as quantum mechanics predicted. Local hidden variable theories couldn't explain what they observed. But science is built on skepticism, and extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. Critics pointed out potential loopholes in the experiment. Maybe the photodetectors were somehow biased, only registering photons that happened to support the quantum mechanical predictions. Maybe the measurement settings were chosen in a way that influenced the results. Maybe there were subtle correlations in the experimental setup that mimicked the appearance of quantum nonlocality. These weren't frivolous objections. They reflected the profound implications of what was being tested. If Bell's theorem was correct, if quantum entanglement was real, then the universe operated according to principles that challenged some of our most basic assumptions about the nature of physical reality. Such a conclusion demanded the highest possible standards of experimental verification. The response from the physics community was to design better experiments, more sophisticated equipment, tighter controls, cleaner statistical analysis. Over the following decades, experiment after experiment confirmed the violation of Bell inequalities. Each new test closed potential loopholes and strengthened the case for quantum nonlocality. Alain Aspect's experiments in France during the early 1980s represented a major step forward. Aspect addressed one of the most serious concerns about earlier tests, the locality loophole. In previous experiments, the measurement settings had been chosen before the entangled photons were created. Critics argued that this timing allowed for the possibility that information about the measurement choices could somehow influence the behavior of the particles, perhaps through some unknown mechanism that respected the speed of light limit. Aspect's innovation was to change the measurement settings while the photons were already in flight, traveling toward their respective detectors. This dynamic switching happened so quickly that even a signal traveling at the speed of light couldn't carry information about one measurement setting to the other detector before the measurement was complete. The locality loophole was closed, and still the correlations violated Bell's inequality. But even Aspect's experiments weren't perfect. The detection efficiency was still relatively low, meaning that only a small fraction of the photons produced were actually detected and measured. This opened what became known as the detection loophole. Maybe the detected photons were somehow special, not representative of all the photons produced. Maybe a complete accounting of all the particles would reveal correlations that respected Bell's limits. The quest for a truly loophole-free Bell test became one of the holy grails of experimental physics. It required not just better detectors and more precise timing, but fundamental advances in quantum control and measurement techniques. Researchers explored different types of entangled particles, from photons to trapped ions to the quantum states of solid-state defects in diamond crystals. Each approach had its advantages and challenges. Photons could travel long distances without losing their quantum properties, making them ideal for testing locality, but they were hard to detect efficiently. Trapped ions could be measured with near-perfect accuracy, but they couldn't be separated by large distances. Solid-state systems offered the best of both worlds but required incredibly sophisticated control techniques. The breakthrough came in 2015 when multiple research groups finally achieved truly loophole-free Bell tests. These experiments closed both the detection and locality loopholes simultaneously, using a combination of high-efficiency detectors, carefully precision in timing and controlled particle sources, and unprecedented measurement. The results were unambiguous. Nature violated Bell inequalities by exactly the amounts quantum mechanics predicted. Local realism, the idea that particles have definite properties and can only influence nearby objects, was dead. The universe had spoken, and its message was clear. Reality is far stranger than we ever imagined. But what does this actually mean for how the world works? When we say the universe is fundamentally connected, we're not talking about some mystical force or hidden energy field. We're talking about something much more profound and much more precise. Quantum entanglement creates correlations between particles that are stronger than anything classical physics allows, yet it does so without transmitting any information faster than light. Think about those coins again. If they were classical objects following the rules of local realism, there would be limits to how perfectly they could coordinate their behavior. Even if they were programmed before separation with the most sophisticated hidden instructions, Bell's theorem proves mathematically that their correlations could never exceed certain bounds. But entangled quantum particles routinely violate these bounds by significant margins. The violation isn't small or subtle. In some experiments, quantum correlations are nearly 40% stronger than the maximum allowed by local realistic theories. This isn't measurement error or experimental uncertainty. It's a fundamental signature of how quantum reality operates, a clear indication that the classical worldview we inherited from centuries of scientific progress is incomplete. Yet here's what makes quantum entanglement even more mysterious. Despite these impossibly strong correlations, you can't use entangled particles to send messages faster than light. If you measure your particle and find it spinning clockwise, you instantly know that a distant entangled particle will be found spinning counterclockwise when measured, but you can't control what result you get from your measurement. The outcomes are random, unpredictable. Your distant partner sees their own sequence of random results. Only when you compare your measurement records later do the correlations become apparent. This creates what physicists call the quantum information paradox. Information information seems to flow between entangled particles instantaneously, yet no usable information can actually be transmitted. It's as if the universe has found a way to violate our intuitions about locality, while still respecting the ultimate speed limit imposed by relativity. The connections are real, but they exist in a realm beyond our everyday experience of cause and effect. The philosophical implications are staggering. Bell's theorem forces us to abandon either locality or realism, two pillars of classical physics that seemed unshakable. Most physicists have chosen to give up classical realism while preserving a more subtle form of locality. In this view, particles don't have definite properties until they're measured, but the measurement process itself doesn't send faster-than-light signals between distant locations. This interpretation preserves the mathematical structure of relativity while acknowledging that quantum mechanics operates according to fundamentally different principles. The universe becomes a place where properties emerge from the act of measurement, where reality is created rather than simply revealed by our observations. It's a strange and counterintuitive picture, but it's the one that emerges consistently from decades of increasingly sophisticated experiments. Other interpretations take different approaches to the puzzle. Some physicists argue that we should preserve realism and accept that the universe is truly non-local, with instantaneous connections spanning arbitrary distances. Others propose that every quantum measurement creates multiple parallel realities, with different outcomes occurring in different branches of an ever-expanding multiverse. Still others suggest that the very concepts of locality and realism need to be completely reconceptualized in light of quantum discoveries. But regardless of which interpretation you prefer, the experimental facts remain the same. Bell's theorem has been tested in hundreds of different ways using dozens of different quantum systems. Photons, electrons, atoms, ions, and even tiny mechanical oscillators have all been shown to violate Bell inequalities when properly entangled. The effect is robust, reproducible, and utterly independent of the specific physical implementation. The technological implications of this quantum strangeness are already reshaping our world. Quantum entanglement isn't just a curiosity for physicists to puzzle over in their laboratories. It's the foundation for an entire emerging technology ecosystem that promises to revolutionize computing, communication, and measurement in ways we're only beginning to understand. Quantum computers leverage entanglement to perform calculations that would be impossible on classical machines. Instead of processing information one bit at a time, quantum computers can explore multiple computational pathways simultaneously using entangled quantum bits, or qubits. When these qubits are properly entangled and manipulated, they can solve certain types of problems exponentially faster than any conventional computer. The applications range from breaking the encryption systems that currently protect our digital infrastructure to simulating the behavior of complex molecules for drug discovery and materials science. Quantum computers could help us understand how photosynthesis works at the molecular level, design more efficient solar cells, or discover new catalysts for removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Quantum communication systems use entanglement to create unbreakable encryption protocols. When information is encoded in entangled quantum states, any attempt to intercept or eavesdrop on the communication inevitably disturbs the quantum system in detectable ways. This creates a form of cryptography that's guaranteed by the laws of physics rather than mathematical assumptions about computational difficulty. Several countries have already deployed quantum communication networks for secure government and financial transactions. China has launched quantum communication satellites that can distribute entangled photons across continental distances. Europe is building a quantum internet infrastructure that will eventually connect quantum computers and communication systems across the continent. Quantum sensors exploit the extreme sensitivity of entangled systems to measure tiny changes in magnetic fields, gravitational forces, and other physical phenomena. These devices could detect dark matter, monitor volcanic activity from space, or image the electrical activity of individual neurons in living brains. Some quantum sensors are already sensitive enough to measure the gravitational effects of underground oil deposits or the magnetic signatures of submarines hidden beneath the ocean surface. But perhaps the most profound impact of Bell's theorem isn't technological at all. It's conceptual. The experimental confirmation of quantum entanglement has forced us to recognize that our intuitive understanding of reality is fundamentally limited. The world doesn't operate according to the common sense principles we've inherited from our evolutionary history or our everyday experience. This recognition extends far beyond physics into philosophy, neuroscience, and our understanding of consciousness itself. If the physical world operates according to principles that seem to transcend space and time, what does that tell us about the nature of mind, identity, and subjective experience? Some researchers have speculated that quantum effects in the brain might explain the unity of consciousness or the binding problem in neuroscience. Others have suggested that quantum entanglement might provide clues about how information is preserved in black holes, or how the universe maintains consistency across cosmic distances. The connections might extend from the smallest scales of particle physics to the largest structures in the cosmos. The story of Bell's theorem is ultimately a story about the power of mathematics to reveal truths about reality that transcend our direct sensory experience. Bell's inequality is a simple mathematical expression, just a few symbols on a page. But those symbols encode profound insights about the nature of physical reality that took decades of sophisticated experiments to fully confirm. In many ways, Bell's theorem represents the culmination of a process that began with Galileo's use of mathematics to describe the motion of falling objects and planetary orbits. Just as Galileo showed that mathematical reasoning could reveal truths about the heavens that contradicted everyday intuition, Bell showed that mathematical analysis of quantum correlations could expose the inadequacy of classical assumptions about locality and realism. The difference is that Bell's discoveries are even more radical than Galileo's. Galileo showed us that the Earth moves around the Sun rather than the other way around. Bell showed us that reality itself operates according to principles that seem to violate the basic structure of space and time. It's a conceptual revolution that's still unfolding, with implications we're only beginning to understand. What makes this even more remarkable is how recently these discoveries have occurred. Bell's theorem was published less than 60 years ago. The first experimental tests happened within living memory. The Loophole-Free experiments that definitively confirmed quantum nonlocality were completed less than a decade ago. We're witnessing one of the most fundamental revolutions in human understanding happening in real time. And we're not done yet. New experiments continue to push the boundaries of what's possible with quantum entanglement. Researchers are entangling larger and larger objects, from individual particles to collections of trillions of atoms. They're creating entangled states that persist for longer and longer periods, from nanoseconds to minutes to hours. They're testing entanglement across greater and greater distances, from laboratory benches to city-wide networks to intercontinental separations using satellites in space. Each new milestone brings us closer to practical applications that seemed like pure fantasy just a few years ago. But the most intriguing developments might be happening at the intersection of quantum physics and biology. Recent discoveries suggest that quantum effects, including entanglement, might play crucial roles in natural processes we never suspected were quantum mechanical. Photosynthesis, the process that converts sunlight into chemical energy in plants, appears to use quantum coherence to achieve near-perfect efficiency in energy transfer. When light hits a leaf, the energy doesn't just randomly bounce around between molecules until it finds the right destination. Instead, it seems to explore multiple pathways simultaneously, using quantum superposition to find the most efficient route. Bird navigation might involve quantum entanglement in specialized proteins in their eyes that allow them to literally see magnetic fields. The Earth's magnetic field creates different patterns of entangled electron pairs depending on the bird's orientation, potentially giving them a quantum compass that helps them navigate during migration. Even smell, one of our most basic senses, might operate through quantum mechanical processes. Some researchers propose that our noses don't just detect the shapes of molecules, but their quantum vibrational states, explaining how we can distinguish between molecules with identical structures but different quantum properties. These biological applications of quantum mechanics suggest that the strange principles revealed by Bell's theorem aren't just laboratory curiosities or technological tools. They might be fundamental features of how life itself operates at the molecular level. Evolution, it seems, discovered quantum mechanics long before physicists did. The implications stretch even further when we consider what Bell's theorem tells us about the nature of scientific knowledge itself. For centuries, science progressed by breaking complex systems down into simpler components, understanding wholes by studying their parts. This reductionist approach led to tremendous successes, from atomic theory to molecular biology to the standard model of particle physics. But quantum entanglement reveals the limitations of pure reductionism. Entangled systems can't be understood by studying their parts in isolation. The whole is literally more than the sum of its parts, with properties that emerge only from the quantum connections between components. This suggests that some phenomena might require fundamentally holistic approaches that consider systems as irreducible wholes. The shift has profound implications for how we think about complex systems in general, from climate patterns to economic markets to neural networks in the brain. Maybe some of the most important properties of these systems emerge from subtle correlations and connections that can't be captured by studying individual components. This connects to one of the most mind-bending aspects of Bell's theorem. The quantum correlations it reveals aren't just statistical coincidences or measurement artifacts. They represent genuine physical connections that exist independently of our knowledge or observation of them. When two particles are entangled, they form a single quantum system that transcends the boundaries we normally think separate, distinct objects. This challenges our most basic intuitions about identity and individuality. In the classical world, every object has clear boundaries that separate it from everything else. A rock is distinct from the air around it. A person is separate from other people. But quantum entanglement suggests that these boundaries might be more fluid than we imagine. At the quantum level, the distinction between self and other, between here and there, becomes meaningless. Entangled particles don't have individual identities in any classical sense. They exist as parts of larger quantum systems that can span arbitrary distances and persist for indefinite periods. Some physicists have speculated that this quantum interconnectedness might extend to macroscopic scales in ways we don't yet understand. Maybe consciousness itself emerges from quantum correlations in the brain that create unified experiences from billions of separate neural processes. Maybe the sense of being a distinct individual is an illusion created by our limited classical perspective on a fundamentally quantum reality. Others have suggested that quantum entanglement might provide clues about the deepest mysteries of cosmology. How does the universe maintain consistent physical laws across regions that are so far apart that light hasn't had time to travel between them since the Big Bang? Maybe quantum correlations established in the earliest moments of cosmic history continue to coordinate the behavior of matter and energy across the observable universe. These ideas remain highly speculative, but they illustrate how Bell's theorem opens up entirely new ways of thinking about reality. The experimental confirmation of quantum entanglement doesn't just settle an old debate about the interpretation of quantum mechanics. It reveals that the universe operates according to principles so strange and counterintuitive that we're still struggling to understand their full implications. What makes this even more remarkable is how the story continues to unfold. Every few months, new experiments push the boundaries of what's possible with quantum entanglement. Researchers have entangled the motional states of objects large enough to see with the naked eye. They've created entangled networks involving dozens of particles simultaneously. They've demonstrated quantum teleportation across hundreds of kilometers using fiber optic cables and satellite links. Each achievement brings us closer to practical quantum technologies that will transform how we compute, communicate, and understand the world around us. But more than that, they deepen our appreciation for just how strange and wonderful the universe really is. The journey from Bell's simple mathematical inequality to today's quantum technologies represents one of the most remarkable chapters in the history of science. It shows how abstract theoretical insights can lead to revolutionary practical applications, how mathematical reasoning can reveal truths about reality that transcend our direct experience, and how the universe continues to surprise us with its depth and complexity. But perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that science isn't just about accumulating facts or developing technologies. It's about expanding our understanding of what's possible, challenging our assumptions about the nature of reality, and discovering connections and patterns that reveal the hidden unity underlying apparent diversity. Bell's theorem tells us that we live in a universe where distant events can be correlated in ways that seem impossible, where measuring one particle instantly affects another, regardless of the space between them, where the act of observation plays a fundamental role in determining what becomes real. It's a universe that operates according to principles that would have seemed like magic to previous generations of scientists. Yet this apparent magic follows precise mathematical laws that we can test, predict, and harness for practical purposes. The same quantum entanglement that violates our classical intuitions about locality and realism also powers the quantum computers that will revolutionize artificial intelligence, the quantum communication systems that will provide unbreakable security, and the quantum sensors that will probe the deepest mysteries of space and time. This paradox lies at the heart of modern physics. The more we learn about the fundamental nature of reality, the stranger it becomes. But the more we understand these strange principles, the more powerful our ability to manipulate and control the world around us. The story of Bell's theorem is far from over. As quantum technologies mature and spread throughout society, we'll discover new applications that we can barely imagine today. Quantum computers might help us understand consciousness, design new materials with impossible properties, or solve climate change by optimizing energy systems at unprecedented scales. Quantum communication networks might create a new kind of internet where information can be transmitted with absolute security, where distributed quantum computers can collaborate on problems too complex for any single machine, where the boundaries between individual devices blur into interconnected quantum systems. Quantum sensors might detect gravitational waves from the Big Bang, map the structure of dark matter throughout the universe, or monitor the quantum states of individual molecules in living cells. They might help us understand how life emerged from non-living matter, how consciousness arises from neural activity, or how intelligence might emerge in artificial systems. But beyond these practical applications, Bell's theorem continues to challenge our deepest philosophical assumptions about the nature of existence itself. If particles can be instantaneously correlated across arbitrary distances, what does that tell us about the fundamental structure of space and time? If measurement plays a crucial role in determining what becomes real, what does that mean for our understanding of objectivity and scientific truth? These questions don't have easy answers, and they may not have answers at all in any traditional sense. But they represent the cutting edge of human knowledge, the frontier where science meets philosophy, where mathematics encounters mystery, where our best theories confront the irreducible strangeness of existence itself. The universe revealed by Bell's theorem is not the clockwork cosmos imagined by classical physics, where everything follows predictable patterns determined by initial conditions and universal laws. It's not the random chaos imagined by those who think quantum mechanics eliminates causation and predictability. Instead, it's something far more subtle and profound, a reality where order and chaos, predictability and randomness, locality and non-locality coexist in ways that transcend our everyday categories of understanding. This is the universe we actually inhabit, the reality revealed by decades of increasingly sophisticated experiments testing the predictions of quantum mechanics against our classical intuitions. It's a universe where the fundamental building blocks of matter and energy are connected in ways that span space and time, where the act of measurement participates in creating the reality it seeks to understand, where the boundaries between observer and observed dissolve into quantum correlations that define what becomes real. Understanding this quantum reality requires us to expand our conception of what science can tell us about the world. It's not enough to catalogue facts and formulate laws. We need new ways of thinking that can embrace paradox, uncertainty, and the fundamental interconnectedness revealed by quantum entanglement. We need approaches that recognize the limitations of classical reductionism while still maintaining the precision and predictive power that make science so successful. The challenge is not just technical but conceptual. How do we make sense of a world where particles can be in multiple states simultaneously until observed, where distant events can be correlated without any causal connection, where the very act of gaining knowledge changes the system being studied? These aren't just problems for physicists to solve in their laboratories. They're challenges that affect how we understand knowledge, reality, and our place in the cosmic order. Bell's theorem doesn't provide final answers to these deep questions. Instead, it opens up new territories for exploration, new frontiers where science and philosophy converge, where mathematics and mystery intersect. It shows us that the universe is far stranger and more wonderful than we ever imagined, but also far more amenable to precise mathematical description and technological manipulation. This combination of strangeness and precision, of mystery and mathematical elegance, represents something uniquely valuable in human knowledge. It reminds us that science isn't just about practical applications or technological progress, important as those are. It's also about expanding our understanding of what's possible, what's real, and what connects us to the larger patterns and processes that shape existence itself. The quantum universe revealed by Bell's theorem is ultimately a universe of connections. Not the mechanical connections of gears and pulleys, not the causal connections of billiard balls colliding, but quantum connections that transcend space and time while still following precise mathematical laws. These connections suggest that reality itself might be fundamentally relational, emerging from patterns of correlation and entanglement that weave individual particles into larger quantum systems. If this view is correct, then isolation is the exception and connection is the rule. The classical picture of independent objects interacting through forces becomes a special case of a deeper quantum reality, where everything is potentially correlated with everything else through subtle entangled states that persist across cosmic distances and timescales. This quantum interconnectedness doesn't eliminate individuality or reduce everything to an undifferentiated whole. Instead, it suggests that individuality and connection are complementary aspects of a richer reality that encompasses both. Particles can be distinct and entangled, separate and connected, individual and part of larger systems simultaneously. This quantum perspective might help us understand not just physics, but the nature of complex systems throughout the universe, from the neural networks in our brains to the ecological webs that sustain life on Earth, from the social connections that bind human communities to the information networks that shape modern civilization. Patterns of connection and correlation seem to play fundamental roles in creating emergent properties that transcend the capabilities of individual components. The brain provides a particularly intriguing example. Consciousness appears to arise not from any single neuron, but from the complex patterns of connection and correlation between billions of neural components. Some researchers have suggested that quantum effects in microtubules within brain cells might help explain the binding problem in neuroscience. How does the brain integrate separate sensory inputs, memory fragments, and cognitive processes into the unified stream of conscious experience we actually live? If quantum entanglement can create instantaneous correlations between distant particles, might similar quantum processes help explain how distributed neural processes become integrated into coherent conscious states? The idea remains highly speculative, but it illustrates how Bell's theorem opens up new ways of thinking about old problems. Maybe consciousness isn't localized in any particular brain region, but emerges from quantum correlations that span the entire neural network. Similar questions arise when we consider ecosystems and their remarkable stability despite constant change. How do millions of species maintain complex ecological relationships across vast geographical areas without any central coordination? How do forest ecosystems regulate temperature, humidity, and chemical cycles with such precision that they can influence weather patterns across entire continents? Traditional approaches focus on local interactions between neighboring species, but quantum mechanics suggests we should also consider the possibility of non-local correlations that help coordinate ecosystem behavior across much larger scales. Maybe the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that Earth's biosphere functions as a self-regulating system, reflects genuine quantum connections between living systems that maintain planetary homeostasis through mechanisms we don't yet understand. The implications extend even further when we consider the origins of life itself. How did random chemical reactions in primordial oceans organize themselves into the first self-replicating molecules? How did these simple replicators evolve into the incredibly complex biochemical networks that sustain modern life? Classical approaches focus on natural selection and random mutations, but they struggle to explain the rapid emergence of biological complexity. Quantum mechanics offers new possibilities. If quantum coherence can persist in biological systems, as recent research suggests, then early life forms might have exploited quantum effects to explore multiple evolutionary pathways simultaneously. Instead of random trial and error, evolution might use quantum superposition to test different molecular configurations in parallel, dramatically accelerating the discovery of functional biological structures. Recent experiments on quantum effects in photosynthesis support this possibility. When light hits a leaf, the energy doesn't just randomly bounce between molecules until it reaches the reaction center. Instead, it appears to use quantum coherence to explore all possible pathways simultaneously, finding the most efficient route through quantum interference effects. This quantum optimization happens on timescales of femtoseconds, far faster than any classical process could achieve such efficiency. If quantum effects played crucial roles in the evolution of photosynthesis, they might have been equally important in the emergence of other fundamental biological processes. DNA replication, protein folding, enzyme catalysis, and neural signaling all depend on molecular interactions that occur at scales where quantum effects become significant. The boundary between classical and quantum biology might be far more porous than we previously imagined. This possibility transforms how we think about the relationship between mind and matter, between consciousness and physical processes. If biological systems routinely exploit quantum mechanics for computational advantages, then the apparent gap between subjective experience and objective physical processes might reflect our limited understanding of quantum biology rather than any fundamental divide between mental and material phenomena. The implications cascade through every level of scientific understanding. In chemistry, quantum entanglement between electrons in molecular bonds might explain catalytic processes that seem impossibly efficient from classical perspectives. In materials science, quantum correlations might help design substances with properties that violate classical intuitions about what's physically possible. In computer science, quantum algorithms might reveal computational principles that transcend the classical distinction between hardware and software, but perhaps the most profound impact involves how we understand scientific knowledge itself. Classical science assumed that objective reality exists independently of observation, that the goal of research is to discover pre-existing truths about how the world works. Bell's theorem challenges this assumption by showing that quantum correlations emerge only through the process of measurement. Reality doesn't just exist to be discovered, it's partially created through the act of scientific investigation. This doesn't mean that science is subjective or that experimental results depend on what researchers want to find. Quantum mechanics makes precise predictions that are confirmed by rigorous experimental tests, but it does suggest that the relationship between scientific knowledge and physical reality is more subtle and complex than classical approaches assumed. When physicists measure entangled particles, they don't just reveal pre-existing properties. They participate in a process that actualizes one specific set of correlations from a broader range of quantum possibilities. The measurement creates the reality it appears to discover, but it does so according to mathematical laws that constrain which realities can be actualized under specific experimental conditions. This participatory aspect of quantum measurement might reflect a more general principle about how complex systems emerge from simpler components. Maybe consciousness arises not just from neural activity, but from the specific ways that brains interact with their environments through sensory systems and motor outputs. Maybe ecosystems achieve stability not just through internal feedback loops, but through their interactions with geological, atmospheric, and cosmic processes. Maybe scientific knowledge emerges not just from theoretical reasoning, but from the specific ways that researchers interact with the phenomena they study. If this participatory view is correct, then the boundaries between observer and observed, between knower and known, become fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. This doesn't eliminate objectivity, but transforms it from a static property of independent reality into a dynamic achievement that emerges from specific kinds of interactions between conscious agents and physical systems. The technological applications of quantum entanglement reflect this participatory relationship between knowledge and reality. Quantum computers don't just process information faster than classical machines, they explore computational spaces that don't exist until the quantum algorithms actualize specific pathways through superposed possibilities. The computation creates the mathematical reality it appears to calculate, but it does so according to quantum mechanical laws that ensure the results are both novel and reliable. Quantum communication systems similarly create the security they appear to discover. When information is encoded in entangled quantum states, the act of eavesdropping necessarily disturbs the quantum correlations in detectable ways. The security emerges from the measurement process itself, not from mathematical assumptions about computational difficulty. The quantum channel becomes secure through the very interactions that establish and maintain the entangled states. Quantum sensors achieve unprecedented precision by exploiting the extreme sensitivity of entangled systems to environmental disturbances. They don't just detect gravitational waves or magnetic fields, they participate in creating the measured phenomena through quantum interactions that amplify tiny effects into macroscopic signals. The boundary between the sensor and the sensed dissolves into quantum correlations that define both measurement and reality simultaneously. These technological applications hint at even more radical possibilities as quantum systems become larger and more sophisticated. Quantum computers with millions of qubits might not just solve computational problems, but create new forms of artificial intelligence that transcend classical distinctions between processing and understanding. Quantum communication networks might not just transmit information, but create distributed forms of consciousness that span multiple physical locations simultaneously. Quantum sensors with unprecedented sensitivity might not just measure physical phenomena, but participate in creating new forms of reality through their interactions with the quantum vacuum itself. If empty space contains virtual particles and fluctuating quantum fields, as quantum field theory suggests, then sufficiently sensitive quantum sensors might be able to manipulate these fluctuations to create entirely new forms of matter and energy. The possibility sounds like science fiction, but it follows logically from established principles of quantum mechanics. If measurement participates in actualizing quantum possibilities, and if quantum possibilities include the creation and annihilation of virtual particles, then measurement might provide a pathway for converting virtual phenomena into real physical effects. The boundary between possibility and actuality becomes permeable through precisely controlled quantum interactions. This permeability extends to the foundations of space and time themselves. According to quantum field theory, space-time emerges from more fundamental quantum processes involving the entanglement of degrees of freedom in quantum fields. Space and time aren't fixed backgrounds against which physical processes occur. They're dynamic structures that emerge from quantum correlations and can potentially be modified through sufficiently sophisticated manipulation of quantum entanglement. If this view is correct, then quantum technologies might eventually provide tools for engineering space-time itself, not just traveling through space faster or measuring time more precisely, but actually modifying the geometric structure of reality through controlled manipulation of quantum entanglement patterns. The implications would transform every aspect of physics, from cosmology to particle physics to the nature of causation itself. But even without such exotic applications, the established consequences of Bell's theorem continue to reshape our understanding of what science can tell us about the world. The experimental confirmation of quantum entanglement shows that reality operates according to principles that transcend our classical intuitions about locality, causation, and the independence of distant events. This doesn't mean that anything is possible, or that quantum mechanics eliminates rational constraints on what can happen. Quite the opposite. Quantum mechanics provides extremely precise mathematical descriptions of how entangled systems behave, what kinds of correlations are possible, and how these correlations change under different experimental conditions. The theory is among the most rigorously tested and successfully applied frameworks in the history of science. But it does mean that the reality described by quantum mechanics is far richer, stranger, and more interconnected than classical physics suggested. The universe revealed by Bell's theorem is not a collection of separate objects interacting through local forces. It's a unified quantum system where the boundaries between parts and wholes, between here and there, between now and then, become fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. Understanding this quantum reality requires new forms of mathematical reasoning that can handle superposition, entanglement, and the contextual emergence of classical properties from quantum processes. It requires experimental techniques that can create, manipulate, and measure quantum states with unprecedented precision and control. It requires philosophical frameworks that can integrate the participatory aspects of quantum measurement with the objective constraints imposed by mathematical laws and experimental reproducibility. Most importantly, it requires a kind of intellectual humility that acknowledges the limitations of classical intuitions while remaining open to the genuine strangeness that quantum mechanics reveals about the fundamental nature of existence. The universe is under no obligation to conform to our expectations about how reality should work. Our job as conscious beings embedded in this quantum cosmos is to expand our understanding until it can embrace the full richness and complexity of what actually exists. Bell's theorem provides a crucial tool for this expansion of understanding. By showing that local realism is incompatible with quantum mechanics, it forces us to choose between classical assumptions about the nature of reality and the experimental evidence for quantum entanglement. The choice isn't really a choice at all. The experiments speak clearly, and they tell us that quantum entanglement is real. But accepting the reality of quantum entanglement means accepting that we live in a universe where distant events can be correlated without any classical causal connection, where the act of measurement participates in creating the reality it seeks to understand, where the boundaries between separate objects dissolve into patterns of quantum correlation that span arbitrary distances and timescales. This quantum universe isn't just a theoretical construct or a mathematical formalism. It's the actual reality we inhabit, the cosmos revealed by the most precise and successful scientific theories ever developed. Understanding this reality doesn't require abandoning rationality or embracing mysticism. It requires expanding our conception of what rationality can encompass, what science can discover, and what kinds of connections and correlations are possible in a truly quantum world. The story that began with Bell's simple mathematical inequality continues to unfold through experimental discoveries, technological innovations, and theoretical insights that push the boundaries of human knowledge ever further into the strange and wonderful territory revealed by quantum mechanics. Each new development deepens our appreciation for the fundamental interconnectedness that underlies apparent separation, the dynamic relationships that create stable structures, and the participatory processes that weave consciousness, measurement, and physical reality into a unified quantum tapestry. We're still in the early stages of understanding what this quantum interconnectedness means for how we live, how we think, and how we relate to the cosmos of which we're part. But Bell's theorem has given us the tools to begin exploring these questions with scientific rigor rather than just philosophical speculation. The answers we discover will likely transform not just physics and technology, but our understanding of what it means to exist as conscious beings in a quantum universe where everything is fundamentally connected to everything else through patterns of entanglement that transcend the classical boundaries of space and time. The quantum future that Bell's theorem has helped make possible isn't just about faster computers or more secure communications, though those applications will certainly transform society in profound ways. It's about recognizing that we're part of a reality where consciousness and cosmos, mind and matter, local and non-local, individual and universal, are not separate categories but complementary aspects of a deeper quantum unity that encompasses and transcends them all. This realization brings us to one of the most startling discoveries of the past few decades. Quantum entanglement isn't limited to carefully controlled laboratory conditions. Nature has been exploiting these quantum connections for billions of years, long before humans ever dreamed of Bell's inequalities or thought experiments about spooky action at a distance. Consider what happens when sunlight hits a leaf. For over a century, scientists assumed that photosynthesis worked through simple classical processes. Light energy would randomly bounce around between molecules until it eventually found its way to the reaction centers where it could be converted into chemical energy. Given all the obstacles and inefficiencies you'd expect from such a random walk, photosynthesis should be a terribly wasteful process. But it's not. Photosynthesis is nearly 100% efficient at capturing and converting light energy. That level of efficiency seemed impossible to explain using classical physics alone. Then researchers started looking more carefully at what actually happens during those first few femtoseconds after light hits a chlorophyll molecule. What they found was quantum coherence. The energy doesn't stumble randomly through the molecular maze. Instead, it exists in a quantum superposition, simultaneously exploring every possible pathway through the photosynthetic complex. Through quantum interference, the destructive pathways cancel out while the constructive ones amplify, guiding the energy along the most efficient route to its destination. This isn't some exotic laboratory phenomenon requiring temperatures near absolute zero and isolation from environmental interference. This is quantum mechanics operating inside living cells at room temperature, in wet, noisy biological environments that should destroy quantum coherence almost instantly. Yet somehow, life has found ways to protect and exploit quantum effects for computational advantages that classical processes simply cannot achieve. The implications cascade far beyond photosynthesis. If evolution discovered quantum computing billions of years ago, what other biological processes might be quantum mechanical in nature? The list keeps growing as researchers develop better tools for detecting quantum effects in living systems. Bird migration might involve quantum entanglement in cryptochrome proteins in their eyes, creating a biological compass that literally allows them to see magnetic fields as visual overlays on their normal sight. The Earth's magnetic field creates different patterns of entangled electron pairs depending on the bird's orientation, giving them navigational information that integrates seamlessly with visual input from their surroundings. Even more intriguingly, some researchers propose that our sense of smell operates through quantum mechanical processes. Instead of just detecting molecular shapes like a lock-and-key mechanism, our olfactory receptors might be sensitive to the quantum vibrational states of molecules. This would explain how we can distinguish between molecules with identical shapes but different isotopic compositions, something that shouldn't be possible if smell were purely classical. The human brain presents the most fascinating possibility of all. Consciousness seems to require the binding of separate sensory inputs, memory fragments, and cognitive processes into unified subjective experiences. How does a brain with billions of individual neurons create a single, coherent sense of self and awareness? Some neuroscientists have proposed that quantum effects in microtubules within brain cells might provide the mechanism for this binding process. If quantum coherence can span large networks of neurons, it might explain how distributed neural processes become integrated into the unified stream of consciousness we actually experience. Consciousness might not emerge from any particular brain region, but from quantum correlations that span the entire neural network. These biological applications of quantum mechanics suggest something profound. The strange principles revealed by Bell's theorem aren't just curiosities for physicists to study in pristine laboratories. They're fundamental features of how complex systems organize themselves, maintain coherence, and process information in the real world. This connects to a deeper truth about the nature of scientific reductionism itself. For centuries, science progressed by breaking complex phenomena down into simpler components, understanding wholes by studying their parts in isolation. This approach led to tremendous successes, from atomic theory to molecular biology, to our current understanding of genetics and biochemistry. But quantum entanglement reveals the limits of pure reductionism. Some systems can't be understood by studying their parts separately because the correlations between parts contain information that doesn't exist in any individual component. The whole becomes literally more than the sum of its parts, with emergent properties that arise only from quantum connections between elements. This suggests that many of the most interesting and important phenomena in nature might require fundamentally holistic approaches. Instead of just cataloguing the properties of individual neurons, we need to understand the quantum correlations that bind them into conscious experience. Instead of just studying individual species, we need to grasp the quantum processes that coordinate ecosystem behavior across vast geographical scales. The shift has profound implications for how we approach complex problems in every field of human knowledge. Climate systems, economic markets, social networks, and even artistic creativity might all involve emergent properties that arise from subtle correlations and connections between components rather than from the components themselves. Consider the stock market. Classical economic theory assumes that individual traders make independent decisions based on available information. But what if quantum-like correlations between traders create collective behaviors that can't be predicted from individual psychology? What if market crashes and bubbles emerge from entangled decision-making processes that span thousands or millions of participants? Or think about social movements and cultural changes. How do new ideas spread through populations with such remarkable speed and coordination? Classical models focus on communication networks and influence patterns, but they struggle to explain how entire societies can shift their beliefs and behaviors almost simultaneously across vast geographical areas. Maybe social change involves quantum-like correlations between individual minds that create collective intelligence phenomena. Not literal quantum entanglement between brains, but analogous processes where individual decisions become correlated in ways that transcend any direct communication or influence. The possibility isn't as far-fetched as it might sound. Recent research in network theory has revealed that many complex systems exhibit what researchers call small world properties, where distant nodes become effectively connected through surprisingly short pathways. Add quantum-like correlations to these network structures, and you get systems where local changes can have global effects almost instantaneously. This brings us back to Bell's theorem and its implications for causation itself. In classical physics, causes precede effects, and influences propagate at finite speeds through direct physical mechanisms. But quantum entanglement creates correlations that seem to transcend these limitations. Effects can be correlated with causes in ways that don't require any physical signal to travel between them. This doesn't violate relativity or allow faster-than-light communication in any practical sense. You still can't use entangled particles to send messages instantaneously across space. But it does suggest that our classical understanding of causation might be incomplete. Maybe cause and effect aren't always sequential processes connected by physical mechanisms. Maybe some correlations emerge from deeper patterns that exist outside ordinary space and time. The implications extend to our understanding of free will and determinism. Classical physics suggested that everything is either predetermined by initial conditions and physical laws, or random due to fundamental uncertainty. But quantum mechanics opens up a third possibility: events that are neither predetermined nor random but emerge from quantum processes that transcend classical categories. When you make a decision, classical thinking suggests it's either determined by prior brain states and environmental inputs, or it's a random quantum fluctuation with no real causal efficacy. But if consciousness involves quantum processes, then your decisions might emerge from quantum correlations that connect your individual mind to broader patterns in the universe itself. This doesn't mean your choices are controlled by cosmic forces or that free will operates through mystical mechanisms. It means that the relationship between individual agency and universal processes might be far more subtle and complex than either pure determinism or pure randomness allows. Your decisions might be genuinely free while still being connected to larger patterns through quantum correlations that span multiple scales of space and time. The technological implications of this expanded understanding of quantum connections are only beginning to emerge. Current quantum computers use entanglement between individual particles to perform calculations that would be impossible for classical machines. But future quantum systems might exploit the kind of complex multi-scale entanglement that seems to operate in biological systems. Instead of just processing information, these quantum systems might develop something approaching genuine understanding by integrating information across multiple levels of organization simultaneously. Classical artificial intelligence tries to simulate intelligence by processing symbols according to logical rules, but quantum artificial intelligence might achieve intelligence by creating the same kind of integrated, holistic awareness that seems to characterize biological consciousness. The difference isn't just computational power, though. Quantum AI will certainly be far more powerful than anything we can build with classical computers. The difference is qualitative. Quantum AI might not just solve problems, but actually understand them in ways that integrate rational analysis with intuitive insight, logical reasoning with creative synthesis. This possibility transforms how we think about the relationship between human and artificial intelligence. Instead of being replaced by machines that think faster but in fundamentally the same ways we do, we might collaborate with quantum systems that think in genuinely different ways, complementing human intelligence with forms of understanding that transcend our individual cognitive limitations. The collaboration might be more intimate than we imagine. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then the boundary between biological and artificial intelligence might become permeable in ways that create hybrid forms of awareness spanning both biological brains and quantum computers, not replacing human consciousness, but extending it into new domains and capabilities. This brings us to perhaps the most profound implication of Bell's theorem. It suggests that consciousness itself might be a fundamental feature of quantum reality rather than just an emergent property of complex information processing. If quantum correlations can create genuine connections that transcend space and time, then consciousness might not be limited to individual brains, but could emerge from quantum processes that span multiple physical systems. The idea sounds mystical, but it follows logically from established principles of quantum mechanics. If measurement plays a fundamental role in actualizing quantum possibilities, and if consciousness is involved in the measurement process, then consciousness might participate directly in creating the reality it experiences, rather than just observing a pre-existing world. This participatory view of consciousness doesn't eliminate objectivity or reduce everything to subjective experience. Quantum mechanics makes precise mathematical predictions that are confirmed by rigorous experimental tests, but it does suggest that the relationship between mind and matter, between subjective experience and objective reality, might be far more intimate and reciprocal than classical approaches assumed. When you observe an entangled quantum system, you don't just learn about pre-existing properties. You participate in a process that actualizes specific correlations from a broader range of quantum possibilities. The observation creates aspects of the reality it appears to discover, but it does so according to mathematical laws that ensure the results are both novel and reliable. Maybe all conscious experience involves similar participatory processes. When you perceive your environment, you don't just receive passive sensory data. You actively participate in creating the experienced world through the specific ways your nervous system interacts with quantum processes in your surroundings. The boundary between perceiver and perceived becomes fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. This participatory understanding of consciousness has practical implications for how we approach mental health, education, and human development. Instead of treating consciousness as a passive recipient of external influences, we might recognize it as an active participant in creating experienced reality through quantum processes that connect individual minds to broader environmental and social contexts. Meditation practices that seem to expand awareness beyond normal boundaries might actually be techniques for accessing the quantum correlations that connect individual consciousness to larger patterns in the universe. Not through supernatural mechanisms, but through perfectly natural quantum processes that operate according to the same mathematical laws that govern entangled particles in physics laboratories. The therapeutic applications could be profound. Depression, anxiety, and other mental health challenges might involve disruptions in the quantum processes that normally integrate individual awareness with broader social and environmental contexts. Healing might involve restoring these quantum connections through practices that enhance coherence between different levels of consciousness organization. Educational approaches might similarly be transformed by recognizing that learning involves quantum processes that connect individual minds to collective knowledge and understanding. Instead of just transmitting information from teachers to students, education might become a collaborative process of actualizing knowledge through quantum correlations between multiple minds working together. The implications extend to every aspect of human culture and social organization. Art, music, literature, and other creative expressions might involve quantum processes that connect individual creativity to collective cultural patterns. Scientific discovery might similarly involve quantum correlations that allow individual researchers to access insights that emerge from the broader scientific community working together. Even democracy and political processes might be transformed by understanding how individual decisions become correlated through quantum-like processes that create collective intelligence. Instead of just aggregating individual preferences, democratic systems might learn to facilitate the kind of coherent collective decision-making that seems to operate in other complex systems throughout nature. But perhaps the most important implication involves how we understand our place in the cosmic order. Bell's theorem shows that we live in a universe where everything is potentially connected to everything else through quantum correlations that transcend ordinary space and time. This doesn't mean that everything affects everything else in any simple or predictable way. The correlations are subtle, contextual, and mediated by complex quantum processes that we're only beginning to understand. But it does mean that the classical picture of isolated individuals struggling for survival in a hostile or indifferent universe is fundamentally incomplete. We're embedded in a web of quantum connections that link our individual consciousness to the broader patterns and processes that shape reality at every scale, from subatomic particles to galactic clusters and beyond. Understanding these connections doesn't require abandoning scientific rigor or embracing unsubstantiated mysticism. It requires expanding our conception of what science can discover about the relationship between consciousness, physical reality, and the quantum processes that seem to underlie both. The experimental methods that confirmed Bell's theorem provide templates for investigating these deeper connections. Just as physicists developed techniques for creating, manipulating, and measuring entangled particles, researchers are beginning to develop methods for studying quantum processes in biological systems, neural networks, and even social organizations. The tools are becoming available to test whether consciousness involves quantum coherence, whether ecosystems use quantum processes for self-organization, whether creative insights emerge from quantum correlations between individual minds, and whether social movements involve quantum-like collective behaviors that transcend classical communication networks. These investigations will likely reveal that the quantum universe disclosed by Bell's theorem extends far beyond the domain of particle physics into every aspect of existence where complex systems organize themselves, process information, and create emergent properties that transcend their individual components. The journey that began with Bell's simple mathematical inequality continues to unfold through discoveries that push the boundaries of human understanding ever deeper into the strange and wonderful territory where quantum mechanics meets consciousness, where individual minds connect to cosmic processes, and where the apparent separation between self and universe dissolves into patterns of correlation and entanglement that define the very nature of existence itself. We're still in the early stages of mapping this quantum landscape of consciousness and cosmos, But Bell's theorem has provided the compass we need to navigate these unexplored territories with scientific precision rather than just philosophical speculation. The discoveries we make will likely transform not just our understanding of physics and biology, but our comprehension of what it means to be conscious beings embedded in a quantum universe where nothing exists in isolation and everything participates in the ongoing creation of reality through correlations that span every scale of space and time. This quantum future that Bell's work has made possible isn't just about technological applications, though those will certainly revolutionize every aspect of human civilization. It's about recognizing that consciousness and cosmos, mind and matter, individual and universal, are not separate categories, but complementary aspects of a deeper quantum unity that encompasses and transcends classical distinctions while still respecting the mathematical precision and experimental rigor that makes science such a powerful tool for understanding reality. The universe revealed by Bell's theorem is not the mechanical clockwork imagined by classical physics, nor the random chaos suggested by crude interpretations of quantum uncertainty. It's something far more subtle and profound. A reality where order and chaos, predictability and creativity, locality and non-locality coexist in dynamic tension, creating the rich complexity and emergent novelty that characterize everything from subatomic interactions to galactic evolution to the emergence of consciousness itself. Living in such a universe requires new forms of wisdom that can integrate scientific understanding with experiential knowledge, mathematical precision with intuitive insight, individual agency with collective participation in the ongoing evolution of reality. Bell's theorem provides one crucial piece of this emerging wisdom by showing us that the connections we experience between ourselves and the world around us aren't illusions or mere metaphors, but reflections of genuine quantum correlations that operate according to precise mathematical laws, while still allowing for the kind of participatory creativity that makes consciousness possible. The story continues to unfold as each new experimental test of Bell's inequalities, each new application of quantum entanglement, each new discovery of quantum processes in biological systems adds another piece to our growing understanding of what it means to exist as conscious beings in a quantum cosmos where separation is the exception and connection is the fundamental rule. The implications ripple outward in ways that would have seemed like pure fantasy just decades ago. Consider what happens when you realize that the quantum connections Bell revealed aren't confined to sterile laboratory conditions. They're woven into the fabric of existence itself, operating at scales and in contexts we never expected. Take your morning cup of coffee. The caffeine molecules that cross into your bloodstream and bind to receptors in your brain might be making their journey through quantum tunneling effects. The electrons that carry signals between your neurons might be exploiting quantum coherence to process information in ways that classical computation simply cannot achieve. The very thoughts you're thinking right now as you read these words might emerge from quantum correlations spanning billions of neural connections. This isn't speculation anymore. It's an active area of research with real experimental results. Scientists have found quantum effects in the microtubules inside brain cells, in the ion channels that regulate neural firing, and in the molecular machinery that maintains the delicate chemical balance necessary for consciousness. The warm, wet, noisy environment of living tissue should destroy quantum coherence almost instantly, yet somehow life has evolved mechanisms to protect and harness these quantum processes for computational advantages that classical biology cannot explain. The discovery transforms how we think about intelligence itself. Your brain isn't just a classical computer made of biological components. It's a quantum information processing system that can explore multiple solution pathways simultaneously, integrate vast amounts of sensory data in parallel, and generate creative insights through quantum interference effects that amplify promising ideas while cancelling out dead ends. When you have that sudden flash of understanding, that moment when a complex problem suddenly becomes clear, you might be experiencing the collapse of a quantum superposition in your neural networks. All the different ways of thinking about the problem exist simultaneously until the measurement-like process of conscious attention actualizes one particular solution pathway. The insight doesn't emerge from step-by-step logical reasoning. It crystallizes all at once from quantum correlations that span multiple levels of neural organization. This quantum nature of thought has profound implications for how we understand creativity, learning, and even the nature of knowledge itself. Classical education assumes that information flows one way, from teacher to student, through sequential transmission of facts and concepts. But if learning involves quantum processes, then the classroom becomes a space where multiple minds create collective understanding through entangled thought processes that transcend individual cognitive boundaries. When a group of students suddenly grasps a difficult concept, they might not be receiving information from the teacher so much as participating in a quantum measurement process that actualizes understanding from a broader field of educational possibilities. The knowledge emerges from the interaction rather than being transmitted through it. Scientists are beginning to test these ideas with experiments that probe the quantum aspects of cognition directly. Brain imaging studies reveal coherent oscillations across neural networks that seem to involve quantum-scale processes. Studies of decision-making show patterns that match quantum models better than classical theories. Research on creativity demonstrates that insights often emerge through non-linear processes that resemble quantum tunneling through conceptual barriers. The evidence suggests that consciousness operates at the intersection of classical and quantum domains, using both types of processes for different cognitive functions. Routine tasks might rely primarily on classical neural computation, while creative problem-solving, intuitive understanding, and integrative awareness might depend more heavily on quantum effects. This hybrid classical quantum nature of mind has practical implications for how we approach mental health, education, and human development. Disorders like depression and anxiety might involve disruptions in the quantum coherence that normally integrates different aspects of consciousness. Therapeutic interventions might work by restoring quantum correlations between neural networks that have become isolated or desynchronized. Meditation practices that seem to expand awareness beyond normal boundaries might be techniques for enhancing quantum coherence in the brain. The sense of unity and interconnectedness that experienced meditators report might reflect genuine quantum entanglement between different regions of the nervous system, or even between individual consciousness and broader environmental processes. The possibility sounds mystical, but it follows naturally from the principles Bell's theorem revealed. If quantum correlations can connect distant particles instantaneously, they might also connect different aspects of consciousness in ways that transcend the classical boundaries between self and world, between individual awareness and collective intelligence. This quantum understanding of consciousness opens up entirely new possibilities for human enhancement and collective problem-solving. Instead of trying to build artificial intelligence that mimics human cognition, we might develop hybrid systems that integrate biological consciousness with quantum computing architectures. The result wouldn't be humans replaced by machines, but human intelligence extended and amplified through quantum processes that span both biological and artificial substrates. Imagine working on a complex scientific problem with a quantum AI system that doesn't just process information but actually shares aspects of your conscious experience through entangled quantum states. The boundary between your individual understanding and the AI's computational capabilities becomes fluid, creating hybrid insights that neither human nor artificial intelligence could achieve alone. Or consider the possibility of quantum-enhanced education, where students and teachers share entangled learning states that allow for direct transmission of understanding rather than just information. Difficult concepts that normally take weeks to master might become clear through quantum correlation processes that integrate multiple minds into collective comprehension networks. The applications extend far beyond individual cognition into social and cultural domains. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then groups of people working together might achieve forms of collective intelligence that transcend the sum of individual contributions. Scientific research teams, artistic collaborations, and democratic decision-making processes might all benefit from understanding and enhancing the quantum correlations that bind individual minds into coherent collective entities. Bell's theorem provides the theoretical foundation for these possibilities by showing that the correlations quantum mechanics predicts are not just mathematical abstractions, but real physical processes that can be measured, controlled, and potentially enhanced. The same experimental techniques that confirmed quantum entanglement between particles can be adapted to study quantum effects in biological systems, neural networks, and even social organizations. But the implications go deeper than practical applications. Bell's discovery forces us to reconsider the most basic assumptions about the nature of reality itself. If distant events can be correlated without any classical causal connection, what does that tell us about the structure of space and time? If measurement participates in creating the reality it seems to discover, what does that mean for the relationship between consciousness and physical existence? These aren't just philosophical puzzles. They're questions that can be investigated through controlled experiments that push the boundaries of what's possible with quantum systems. Recent advances in quantum technology have made it possible to create entangled states involving thousands or even millions of particles, to maintain quantum coherence for extended periods, and to test the limits of quantum correlations under increasingly realistic conditions. Each new milestone brings us closer to understanding whether the quantum connections Bell revealed extend beyond individual particles to encompass larger systems, longer timescales, and more complex forms of organization. The evidence so far suggests that quantum effects scale up in ways that could transform our understanding of everything from molecular biology to cosmology. At the molecular level, quantum tunneling and coherence effects appear to play crucial roles in enzyme catalysis, DNA replication, and protein folding. These biological processes achieve levels of efficiency and specificity that seem impossible from classical perspectives, but make perfect sense when quantum effects are included in the analysis. At larger scales, some researchers have proposed that quantum correlations might help explain the remarkable coordination observed in flocks of birds, schools of fish, and other collective biological phenomena. The rapid, synchronized responses that allow thousands of individuals to move as a unified whole might involve quantum information processing that transcends classical communication networks. At cosmic scales, quantum entanglement might provide clues about some of the deepest mysteries in physics and cosmology. How does the universe maintain consistent physical laws across regions so vast that light hasn't had time to travel between them since the Big Bang? How do black holes preserve information while appearing to destroy everything that falls into them? How does dark matter interact with ordinary matter in ways that shape the large-scale structure of the cosmos? These questions don't have easy answers, but Bell's theorem provides conceptual tools for approaching them. If quantum correlations can connect distant particles instantaneously, they might also connect distant regions of space-time in ways that maintain cosmic coherence across scales that classical physics cannot explain. The possibility that quantum entanglement operates at cosmic scales has practical implications for future space exploration and communication. Instead of sending radio signals that take years to travel between planets, we might develop quantum communication systems that provide instantaneous contact across interstellar distances. Instead of launching massive rockets to explore distant worlds, we might use quantum sensors to probe remote environments through entangled states that span light years of space. These applications remain highly speculative, but they illustrate how Bell's theorem continues to open up new territories for both theoretical investigation and practical exploration. The universe it reveals is far stranger and more interconnected than anyone imagined, but also far more amenable to understanding and manipulation through precise mathematical analysis and controlled experimentation. The ongoing research program inspired by Bell's work involves thousands of scientists around the world working to understand quantum correlations in systems ranging from individual atoms to biological cells to astronomical objects. Each discovery adds another piece to the emerging picture of a reality where consciousness and cosmos, local and global, individual and collective, are not separate domains but interconnected aspects of a unified quantum system. The practical applications emerging from this research are already beginning to transform technology and society. Quantum computers are solving problems that would take classical machines billions of years to complete. Quantum communication networks are providing unbreakable security for financial transactions and government communications. Quantum sensors are detecting gravitational waves from colliding black holes and measuring magnetic fields with unprecedented precision. But these current applications represent just the beginning of what becomes possible when we fully understand and harness the quantum connections that Bell's theorem revealed. Future quantum technologies might not just process information faster or communicate more securely. They might create entirely new forms of intelligence that integrate human consciousness with quantum computational capabilities in ways that transcend current distinctions between natural and artificial cognition. The trajectory points toward a future where the boundaries between mind and machine, individual and collective, local and universal, become increasingly fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. Not through mystical dissolution of differences, but through precise understanding and technological implementation of the quantum correlations that Bell showed connect all aspects, eliminate individuality, or reduce everything to an of reality at the deepest level. This quantum future won undifferentiated unity. Instead, it promises to reveal individuality and unity as complementary aspects of a richer reality that encompasses both. You can be a distinct conscious being with your own unique perspective and experience while simultaneously participating in quantum correlations that connect your individual awareness to broader patterns of intelligence and organization throughout the cosmos. The key insight from Bell's work is that these connections are not optional or accidental features of reality. They're fundamental aspects of how the universe operates at its deepest level. Understanding them doesn't require abandoning scientific rigor or embracing unsubstantiated claims about supernatural phenomena. It requires expanding our conception of what science can discover about the relationship between consciousness, physical processes, and the quantum foundations of existence itself. The experimental methods that confirmed Bell's inequalities provide templates for investigating these deeper connections with the same precision and reliability that characterize the most successful scientific theories. The mathematics of quantum mechanics offers conceptual frameworks for understanding how individual and collective, local and non-local, classical and quantum aspects of reality relate to each other in ways that preserve both scientific objectivity and the genuine novelty that emerges from quantum processes. The philosophical implications challenge us to develop new forms of wisdom that can integrate rational analysis with experiential understanding, individual agency with collective participation, scientific knowledge with the direct awareness that consciousness brings to its encounter with reality. Bell's theorem provides one crucial element of this emerging synthesis by showing that the connections we experience between ourselves and the world around us reflect genuine physical processes that operate according to mathematical laws while still allowing for the creativity and freedom that make consciousness possible. Living in a quantum universe means recognizing that separation is always partial and connection is always possible. The barriers between self and other, between here and there, between now and then are real and important for practical purposes, but they're not absolute or impermeable. Quantum correlations can transcend these barriers in ways that create genuine novelty while respecting the constraints that make stable structures and coherent experiences possible. This quantum perspective transforms how we approach every aspect of human existence, from personal relationships to scientific research to social organization. Instead of seeing ourselves as isolated individuals competing for limited resources in a hostile environment, we can recognize our embeddedness in webs of quantum correlation that connect individual flourishing with collective well-being through processes that benefit everyone when properly understood and implemented. The transition to this quantum worldview won't happen overnight, and it won't be easy. It requires abandoning comfortable classical assumptions about the nature of reality while learning to navigate a cosmos that operates according to principles that often seem counterintuitive or paradoxical from everyday perspectives. But the rewards include access to forms of understanding, capability, and connection that are simply impossible from purely classical approaches. Bell's theorem has given us the key to unlock these possibilities. The experimental confirmation of quantum entanglement has shown that the connections are real, measurable, and potentially controllable through technological systems that are already beginning to emerge from research laboratories into practical applications. The mathematical framework of quantum mechanics provides precise tools for analyzing and predicting how these connections operate under different conditions. What remains is the ongoing work of exploration, experimentation, and integration that will gradually reveal the full implications of living in a quantum universe where everything is fundamentally connected through correlations that transcend classical boundaries while still respecting the mathematical laws and experimental constraints that make science possible. The journey that began with Bell's simple mathematical inequality continues to unfold through discoveries that push human understanding ever deeper into territories where physics meets philosophy, where individual consciousness encounters cosmic processes, and where the apparent separation between observer and observed dissolves into quantum correlations that define the very nature of existence itself. We're participants in this ongoing exploration, not just passive observers of a pre-existing reality, but active contributors to the quantum processes that create the world we experience through our choices, measurements, and interactions with the systems around us. Bell's theorem has shown us that this participatory relationship between consciousness and cosmos is not a philosophical speculation, but a measurable physical phenomenon that operates according to precise mathematical laws. Understanding these laws and learning to work with them rather than against them opens up possibilities for human development and social organization that previous generations could never have imagined. We're still in the early stages of this quantum revolution, but the trajectory is clear. We're moving toward a future where the strange principles that Bell revealed in the microscopic world of entangled particles will reshape how we understand and organize reality at every scale, from individual consciousness to cosmic evolution. The universe that emerges from this understanding is neither the mechanical clockwork of classical physics nor the random chaos of crude quantum interpretations. It's something far more subtle and profound, a reality where order and novelty, predictability and creativity, individual agency and collective intelligence coexist in dynamic relationships that create the rich complexity and emergent possibilities that characterize everything from subatomic interactions to the emergence of consciousness itself. Bell's quantum theorem has revealed that we live in such a universe. The ongoing task is learning how to inhabit it wisely, creatively, and responsibly as conscious beings whose individual choices and collective actions participate in the continuing evolution of reality through quantum processes that connect every moment with every other across all scales of space and time. The experimental tests of Bell's theorem weren't just laboratory exercises. They were detective stories unfolding in real time, with physicists playing the role of cosmic investigators trying to solve the deepest mystery in the universe. What makes something real, and how can we tell the difference between what merely appears to be connected and what actually is connected at the most fundamental level? By the 1990s, the evidence was becoming overwhelming. Experiment after experiment confirmed that quantum entanglement violated Bell's inequalities by exactly the amounts that quantum mechanics predicted. But science is built on skepticism, especially when the implications are this profound. Critics kept finding potential loopholes, tiny gaps in the experimental design that might allow classical explanations to sneak back in. The detection loophole was particularly troubling. Most experiments could only detect a small fraction of the particles they produced. Maybe the particles that were successfully measured weren't representative of all the particles created. Maybe nature was playing a statistical trick, allowing only the special particles that supported quantum predictions to reach the detectors while hiding the ones that would reveal classical behavior. The locality loophole was even more subtle. Even if you separated your detectors by large distances, you still needed some way to coordinate when the measurements happened. If there was any possibility that information about one measurement could influence the other, even traveling at the speed of light, then classical physics might still have a way to explain the correlations. And then there was the freedom of choice loophole, perhaps the strangest objection of all. What if the experimenters didn't really have free will in choosing their measurement settings? What if the same hidden variables that determined how particles behaved also influenced what choices the physicists made about how to measure them? It sounds paranoid, but if you're willing to consider it, then even perfect correlations might not prove quantum entanglement. The quest to close all these loopholes simultaneously became one of the holy grails of experimental physics. It required pushing technology to its absolute limits and beyond. Researchers needed near-perfect detectors that could catch almost every particle produced. They needed measurement apparatus separated by distances large enough that light couldn't travel between them during the measurement process. And they needed truly random ways of choosing measurement settings that couldn't be correlated with the quantum systems being tested. In 2015, 3 different research groups finally achieved the impossible. Using completely different approaches, they all performed Bell tests that closed every known loophole simultaneously. The Delft experiment used electron spins trapped in diamond crystals separated by more than a kilometer. The Vienna group used entangled photons with ultra-efficient detectors and rapid random number generators. The NIST team in Colorado employed trapped ions with near-perfect measurement accuracy. All 3 experiments told the same story. Nature violated Bell's inequalities by exactly the margins quantum mechanics predicted. There were no loopholes left. No classical explanation could account for what they observed. The universe really is non-local in ways that would have seemed like pure magic to previous generations of scientists. But here's what makes this even more remarkable. These weren't just abstract physics experiments happening in isolated laboratories. The same quantum entanglement that violates Bell's inequalities is already being harnessed for practical technologies that are beginning to reshape our world. Quantum cryptography systems use entangled particles to create communication channels that are fundamentally secure. When information is encoded in quantum states, any attempt to intercept the message necessarily disturbs the quantum system in ways that both sender and receiver can detect. The security isn't based on mathematical assumptions about what problems are hard to solve. It's guaranteed by the laws of physics themselves. China has already launched quantum communication satellites that can distribute entangled photons across continental distances. Banks in several countries use quantum encryption to protect high-value financial transactions. Government agencies employ quantum communication networks for diplomatic and military communications that need absolute security. Quantum computers represent an even more dramatic application of entanglement. Instead of processing information sequentially like classical computers, quantum machines can explore multiple computational pathways simultaneously using entangled quantum bits. For certain types of problems, this provides exponential speedups that would be impossible with any classical approach. Google's quantum computer achieved quantum supremacy in 2019 by performing a calculation in minutes that would take the world's most powerful classical supercomputers thousands of years. IBM, Microsoft, and dozens of smaller companies are racing to build quantum computers powerful enough to break the encryption systems that currently protect our digital infrastructure. But the applications go far beyond cryptography and computation. Quantum sensors exploit the extreme sensitivity of entangled systems to measure incredibly tiny changes in magnetic fields, gravitational forces, and other physical phenomena. These devices can detect dark matter, monitor underground geological activity, or map the electrical patterns in living brains with unprecedented precision. The LIGO gravitational wave detectors that first observed ripples in space-time from colliding black holes use quantum techniques to measure length changes smaller than 1/10,000th the width of a proton. Quantum magnetometers can detect the magnetic signatures of neural activity in the brain without any physical contact with the skull. Quantum gravimeters can map underground oil deposits or monitor volcanic activity from aircraft flying overhead. Each new application demonstrates that Bell's theorem wasn't just revealing abstract truths about the foundations of physics. It was pointing toward technological capabilities that are transforming how we understand and interact with reality at every scale. But the most profound implications might be happening at the intersection of quantum physics and biology. Over the past 2 decades, researchers have discovered quantum effects operating in living systems where they should be impossible to maintain. The warm, wet, noisy environment inside biological cells should destroy quantum coherence almost instantly. Yet life seems to have evolved mechanisms to protect and exploit quantum processes for computational advantages that classical biology cannot explain. Photosynthesis uses quantum coherence to achieve nearly perfect efficiency in converting light energy to chemical energy. Instead of randomly bouncing between molecules until it finds its destination, light energy exists in quantum superposition, simultaneously exploring every possible pathway through the photosynthetic apparatus. Quantum interference eliminates the inefficient routes while amplifying the optimal ones. This isn't happening at absolute zero temperatures in carefully isolated laboratory conditions. This is quantum mechanics operating inside living plants at room temperature in environments full of thermal noise and molecular chaos. Somehow, evolution discovered quantum computing billions of years before physicists did. The implications cascade through every level of biological organization. If quantum effects can persist in photosynthetic complexes, they might also operate in other cellular processes. DNA replication, protein folding, enzyme catalysis, and neural signaling all involve molecular interactions at scales where quantum effects become significant. Some researchers propose that bird navigation involves quantum entanglement in specialized proteins in their eyes. The Earth's magnetic field creates different patterns of entangled electron pairs depending on the bird's orientation, essentially giving them a quantum compass that allows them to see magnetic fields as visual overlays on their normal sight. Even more intriguingly, mounting evidence suggests that human consciousness itself might involve quantum processes. The microtubules inside brain cells show quantum effects that could help explain how billions of separate neural processes become integrated into unified conscious experience. When you have a sudden insight or creative breakthrough, you might be witnessing the collapse of a quantum superposition in your neural networks. This quantum nature of biological processes suggests something profound about the relationship between mind and matter, between consciousness and physical reality. Instead of consciousness emerging from purely classical neural computation, it might arise from quantum processes that connect individual awareness to broader patterns of information and organization throughout the universe. The possibility sounds mystical until you remember that it's grounded in the same mathematical framework and experimental evidence that confirmed Bell's theorem. Quantum mechanics isn't magic. It's the most precisely tested and successfully applied theory in the history of science. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then understanding those processes becomes a matter of rigorous scientific investigation rather than philosophical speculation. Recent experiments have begun probing the quantum aspects of biological systems directly. Researchers use sophisticated techniques to measure quantum coherence in photosynthetic complexes, to detect quantum effects in enzyme reactions, and to search for quantum signatures in neural activity. The evidence consistently supports the idea that life exploits quantum mechanics in ways that classical approaches cannot explain. This quantum biology revolution is converging with advances in quantum technology to create entirely new possibilities for understanding and enhancing human capabilities. Instead of building artificial intelligence that mimics classical neural computation, we might develop hybrid systems that integrate biological consciousness with quantum computing architectures. Imagine working with an AI system that doesn't just process information, but actually shares aspects of your conscious experience through entangled quantum states. The boundary between your individual understanding and the system's computational capabilities becomes fluid, creating insights that neither human nor artificial intelligence could achieve alone. Or consider quantum-enhanced education, where the learning process itself involves quantum correlations between student and teacher minds. Difficult concepts that normally require weeks of study might become clear through direct transmission of understanding rather than just information transfer. These possibilities aren't science fiction, they're natural consequences of taking Bell's theorem seriously and following its implications wherever they lead. If quantum entanglement can create instantaneous correlations between distant particles, it might also create connections between different aspects of consciousness, between individual minds, and between human awareness and the broader patterns of intelligence that seem to operate throughout the natural world. The key insight is that consciousness doesn't exist in isolation from the physical processes that quantum mechanics describes. Your thoughts, emotions, and perceptions emerge from the same quantum fields and particles that populate the entire universe. The boundaries between self and world, between mind and matter, become fluid and contextual rather than fixed and absolute. This quantum understanding of consciousness has practical implications for mental health, creativity, and human development. Depression and anxiety might involve disruptions in the quantum coherence that normally integrates different aspects of awareness. Therapeutic interventions might work by restoring quantum correlations between neural networks that have become isolated or desynchronized. Meditation practices that expand awareness beyond normal boundaries might be techniques for enhancing quantum coherence in the brain. The sense of unity and interconnectedness that experienced meditators report might reflect genuine quantum entanglement between different regions of consciousness, or even between individual awareness and broader environmental processes. The scientific study of these possibilities is just beginning, but the conceptual framework provided by Bell's theorem gives us tools for investigating them with the same rigor that characterizes the most successful areas of physics research. We can design experiments to test whether consciousness involves quantum processes, whether meditation enhances neural coherence, whether creative insights emerge from quantum correlations in brain networks. The answers we discover will likely transform not just neuroscience and psychology, but our understanding of what it means to be conscious beings embedded in a quantum universe where everything is potentially connected to everything else through correlations that transcend ordinary space and time. This brings us to perhaps the most startling realization of all. The quantum connections that Bell revealed aren't confined to carefully controlled laboratory experiments or exotic biological processes. They're woven into the fabric of reality itself, operating at scales and in contexts that encompass every aspect of existence. When you look up at the night sky, you're seeing light that traveled millions of years to reach your eyes. But quantum mechanics suggests that the photons hitting your retina might be entangled with other particles scattered throughout the cosmos. The act of seeing connects you directly to distant stars and galaxies through quantum correlations that span unimaginable distances. When you have a conversation with another person, the words you exchange carry information through sound waves and electromagnetic fields. But the thoughts behind those words might involve quantum processes that create more intimate connections between minds than classical communication allows. Understanding and empathy might emerge from quantum correlations that transcend the boundaries between separate individuals. When you make a decision about what to do next, classical thinking suggests it's either determined by prior brain states or random quantum fluctuations. But if consciousness involves quantum processes, your choices might emerge from quantum correlations that connect individual agency to broader patterns of possibility and meaning throughout the universe. These connections don't eliminate personal responsibility or reduce individual experience to cosmic determinism. Instead, they suggest that the relationship between personal freedom and universal order is far more subtle and complex than either pure free will or strict causation allows. Your decisions are genuinely yours, while still being connected to larger patterns through quantum processes that operate according to precise mathematical laws. The implications extend to every domain of human experience and social organization. Scientific discovery might involve quantum correlations that allow individual researchers to access insights emerging from the broader scientific community. Artistic creativity might draw on quantum processes that connect personal expression to collective cultural patterns. Democratic decision-making might benefit from understanding how individual choices become correlated through quantum-like processes that create genuine collective intelligence. Even economic systems might operate through quantum-like correlations between individual decisions that create market behaviors impossible to predict from classical models. The boom and bust cycles that characterize financial markets might reflect quantum interference patterns between millions of individual choices, creating collective behaviors that emerge from the quantum nature of decision-making itself. These possibilities transform how we think about complex systems throughout the natural and social worlds. Instead of trying to understand wholes by studying their parts in isolation, we need approaches that can handle the quantum correlations that often contain the most important information about how systems actually behave. Climate systems might involve quantum-like correlations between local weather patterns that create global effects impossible to predict from studying individual regions separately. Ecosystem dynamics might depend on quantum processes that coordinate the behavior of millions of species across vast geographical areas. Even the evolution of life itself might involve quantum effects that allow organisms to explore multiple evolutionary pathways simultaneously. The shift toward quantum thinking represents one of the most fundamental changes in scientific worldview since the Copernican revolution. Just as Copernicus showed that Earth wasn't the center of the universe, Bell's theorem shows that classical locality isn't the foundation of physical reality. The implications are still unfolding, but they point toward a future where our understanding of consciousness, life, and cosmic evolution will be transformed by recognizing the quantum connections that link everything to everything else. We're living through this transformation in real time. Every few months, new experiments push the boundaries of what's possible with quantum systems. Researchers have created entangled states involving thousands of particles, maintained quantum coherence for hours at a time, and demonstrated quantum effects in objects large enough to see with the naked eye. Each breakthrough brings us closer to technologies that will seem miraculous by today's standards: quantum computers with millions of qubits that can solve problems no classical machine could ever handle, quantum communication networks that provide absolutely secure information transfer across global distances, quantum sensors that can detect single molecules in biological systems or gravitational effects from dark matter particles. But perhaps more importantly, each advance deepens our understanding of what it means to exist as conscious beings in a quantum universe. The connections Bell revealed between distant particles might be just the tip of an iceberg of quantum correlations that link individual awareness to cosmic processes, personal experience to universal patterns, and human consciousness to the ongoing evolution of reality itself. The universe that emerges from this quantum perspective is neither the mechanical clockwork of classical physics nor the random chaos suggested by crude interpretations of quantum uncertainty. It's something far more subtle and profound, a reality where order and novelty, predictability and creativity, individual agency and collective intelligence coexist in dynamic relationships that create the rich complexity we observe at every scale, from subatomic particles to galactic clusters. Living in such a universe requires new forms of wisdom that can integrate scientific precision with experiential understanding, rational analysis with intuitive insight, individual development with collective flourishing. Bell's theorem provides one crucial element of this emerging synthesis by showing that the connections we experience between ourselves and the world around us reflect genuine physical processes that operate according to mathematical laws, while still allowing for the freedom and creativity that make consciousness possible. The journey that began with Bell's simple mathematical inequality continues through discoveries that push human understanding ever deeper into territories where physics meets philosophy, where individual minds encounter cosmic intelligence, and where the apparent separation between observer and observed dissolves into quantum correlations that define the very nature of existence itself. We're not just studying this quantum reality from the outside, we're participants in it, conscious beings whose choices and observations actively participate in creating the world we experience through quantum processes that connect every moment with every other across all scales of space and time. The most remarkable thing about Bell's discovery is how it forces us to abandon one of our most cherished assumptions about reality. For centuries, scientists believed that the universe operated like a vast machine, with each part affecting only its immediate neighbors through direct physical contact. Information couldn't travel faster than light. Objects had definite properties whether anyone was looking at them or not. The past was fixed. The future was determined by present conditions, and everything made logical sense if you just understood the rules well enough. Bell's theorem demolishes this comfortable worldview completely. The experiments don't just suggest that particles can influence each other across vast distances. They prove it beyond any reasonable doubt. When two particles become entangled, measuring one instantly affects the other, regardless of how much space separates them. It's not that information travels between them at incredible speeds. It's that they remain connected in a way that transcends space and time entirely. Think about what this actually means. Right now, as you're reading these words, there are particles in your body that were once part of distant stars. Some of these particles might still be entangled with others scattered throughout the galaxy. The calcium atoms in your bones, the iron in your blood, the carbon in your DNA, all of these elements were forged in stellar furnaces billions of years ago. If quantum entanglement persists across cosmic distances and timescales, then you're literally connected to the stars in ways that go far beyond poetic metaphor. This isn't New Age mysticism. This is hardcore physics backed by mathematical proofs and experimental evidence. The same quantum mechanics that allows for these seemingly impossible connections also powers the device you're using to read this, enables the GPS satellites that guide you home, and makes possible the medical imaging technologies that can see inside your body without cutting it open. Quantum mechanics works. And if it works, then the universe really does operate according to principles that would have seemed like pure magic just a century ago. But here's where things get even stranger. The quantum connections Bell discovered aren't limited to pairs of particles created in laboratory experiments. They appear to operate in biological systems that should be far too warm and chaotic to maintain quantum coherence. Plants use quantum effects in photosynthesis to achieve nearly perfect energy transfer efficiency. Birds might navigate using quantum compasses in their eyes, and mounting evidence suggests that human consciousness itself emerges from quantum processes in the brain. Consider what happens when you recognize someone's face in a crowd. Classical neuroscience says your brain processes visual information through hierarchical networks that build up complex patterns from simple features. But this process should take much longer than the near-instantaneous recognition that actually occurs. Quantum theories of consciousness suggest that your brain might use quantum coherence to search through memory patterns in parallel, collapsing into recognition when the right match is found. The same quantum processes that allow particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously might allow your thoughts to explore multiple possibilities before settling on specific ideas or decisions. When you have that sudden flash of insight that solves a problem you've been struggling with, you might be experiencing the collapse of a quantum superposition in your neural networks. All the different ways of thinking about the problem exist simultaneously until conscious attention actualizes one particular solution. This quantum nature of thought has profound implications for how we understand creativity, learning, and problem solving. Instead of viewing the mind as a classical computer that processes information sequentially, we might need to think of it as a quantum system that can explore vast solution spaces in parallel. The difference isn't just computational power, though quantum processes are exponentially more powerful than classical ones. The difference is qualitative, involving forms of understanding that integrate logic with intuition, analysis with synthesis, individual insight with collective intelligence. Educational systems built around this quantum understanding of mind might look completely different from current approaches. Instead of transmitting information from teacher to student through sequential presentation of facts and concepts, Learning might involve creating quantum correlations between minds that allow for direct sharing of understanding. Difficult concepts that currently require weeks or months to master might become clear through quantum resonance between student and teacher consciousness. The implications extend far beyond individual cognition into social and cultural domains. If consciousness involves quantum processes, then groups of people working together might achieve forms of collective intelligence that transcend what any individual could accomplish alone. Scientific research teams, artistic collaborations, and democratic decision-making processes might all benefit from understanding and enhancing the quantum correlations that bind individual minds into coherent collective entities. But perhaps the most startling possibility involves the relationship between human consciousness and the cosmos itself. If quantum entanglement can connect particles across galactic distances, it might also connect human awareness to broader patterns of intelligence and organization throughout the universe. The sense of cosmic connection that mystics and philosophers have reported for millennia might reflect genuine quantum correlations between individual consciousness and universal processes. This doesn't mean that human minds are controlled by cosmic forces or that individual thoughts directly influence distant galaxies. Quantum correlations are subtle and contextual, operating according to precise mathematical laws that preserve both individual autonomy and collective coherence. But it does suggest that the boundaries between self and universe, between personal experience and cosmic evolution, might be far more fluid than classical thinking assumes. Recent developments in quantum technology are beginning to make these possibilities testable rather than purely speculative. Quantum computers with thousands of qubits can now perform calculations that would be impossible for classical machines, demonstrating that quantum parallelism can solve real problems exponentially faster than sequential processing. Quantum communication networks are being deployed for secure information transfer, showing that entanglement can be harnessed for practical applications across continental distances. But the most intriguing developments involve attempts to detect quantum effects in biological systems directly. Researchers are using sophisticated techniques to measure quantum coherence in cellular processes, to map quantum correlations in neural networks, and to test whether consciousness involves quantum entanglement between different brain regions. The preliminary results suggest that quantum effects in biology are far more widespread and important than anyone previously imagined. If these investigations confirm that consciousness involves quantum processes, the implications will transform every aspect of human knowledge and capability. Mental health treatments might focus on restoring quantum coherence in neural networks rather than just adjusting chemical neurotransmitter levels. Educational approaches might emphasize creating quantum resonance between minds rather than simply transferring information from teacher to student. Social organizations might be designed to enhance collective quantum intelligence rather than just aggregating individual contributions. The technological applications could be even more revolutionary. Hybrid systems that integrate biological consciousness with artificial quantum processors might achieve forms of intelligence that transcend current distinctions between natural and synthetic cognition. Instead of replacing human intelligence with artificial systems, we might enhance human consciousness through quantum interfaces that extend individual awareness into broader computational and informational networks. Imagine collaborating with an AI system that doesn't just process data, but actually shares aspects of your conscious experience through entangled quantum states. The boundary between your individual understanding and the system's computational capabilities becomes permeable, creating insights that emerge from the quantum correlation between biological and artificial intelligence rather than from either system alone. Or consider quantum-enhanced creativity, where artistic expression draws on quantum correlations between individual imagination and collective cultural patterns. Musicians might compose symphonies that emerge from quantum resonance between their personal creativity and the broader musical traditions of their culture. Writers might create stories that tap into quantum narratives spanning multiple cultural and historical contexts simultaneously. The possibilities extend into every domain of human activity where complex problems require integrative solutions that transcend what classical approaches can achieve. Climate change, economic inequality, political polarization, and other global challenges might be addressed through quantum approaches that can handle the correlations and feedback loops that make these systems so difficult to understand and modify using purely classical methods. But realizing these possibilities requires more than just technological development. It demands a fundamental shift in how we understand the relationship between consciousness and cosmos, between individual agency and collective intelligence, between scientific knowledge and experiential wisdom. Bell's theorem provides the conceptual foundation for this shift by proving that the universe operates according to principles that transcend classical boundaries, while still respecting mathematical precision and experimental verification. The transition won't be easy or automatic. Classical thinking is deeply embedded in our language, our institutions, and our everyday habits of mind. Learning to think quantum requires developing new cognitive skills that can handle superposition, entanglement, and the contextual emergence of definite properties from indefinite possibilities. It means becoming comfortable with paradox and uncertainty, while still maintaining the clarity and precision that make scientific progress possible. But the rewards justify the effort. A quantum understanding of consciousness and cosmos opens up possibilities for human development and social organization that previous generations could never have imagined. We're not just talking about incremental improvements in existing capabilities, but qualitative transformations in what becomes possible when human intelligence learns to work with quantum processes rather than against them. The universe revealed by Bell's theorem is ultimately a universe of creative potential. Instead of being trapped in mechanical determinism or random chaos, we find ourselves embedded in a reality where novelty and order coexist in dynamic tension, where individual choices participate in collective evolution, where consciousness and cosmos collaborate in the ongoing creation of new forms of complexity and beauty. Living in such a universe means recognizing that we're not separate observers studying an external world, but participants in quantum processes that connect our individual awareness to the broader patterns of intelligence and creativity that operate throughout the natural world. Our thoughts, decisions, and actions don't just reflect what we believe about reality, they actively participate in creating the reality we experience through quantum correlations that link every moment of conscious experience to the cosmic evolution of complexity and meaning. This participatory relationship between mind and universe doesn't eliminate scientific objectivity or reduce everything to subjective opinion. Quantum mechanics makes precise mathematical predictions that are confirmed by rigorous experimental tests, but it does suggest that the relationship between scientific knowledge and physical reality is more intimate and reciprocal than classical approaches assumed. We don't just discover pre-existing truths about how the world works. We participate in processes that actualize specific possibilities from broader ranges of quantum potential. The implications cascade through every level of scientific understanding and technological application. Instead of building machines that simply process information faster, we might create quantum systems that participate in the same creative processes that generate consciousness, life, and cosmic evolution. Instead of treating intelligence as a property that some systems have and others lack, we might recognize intelligence as an emergent property of quantum correlations that can arise wherever sufficient complexity and coherence come together. These developments point toward a future where the boundaries between natural and artificial, individual and collective, human and cosmic intelligence become increasingly fluid and collaborative rather than competitive and separate. Not through the elimination of differences, but through the recognition that differences emerge from and contribute to larger patterns of quantum correlation that encompass and transcend individual perspectives, while still allowing for genuine novelty and creative expression. Bell's theorem has shown us that we live in such a universe. The ongoing challenge is learning how to inhabit it wisely and creatively as conscious beings whose individual choices and collective actions participate in quantum processes that connect every moment with every possibility across all scales of space and time. The connections are real, the correlations are measurable, and the implications are still unfolding in ways that will continue to transform human understanding and capability for generations to come. What started as a simple mathematical inequality designed to test competing theories about the nature of physical reality, has evolved into a comprehensive framework for understanding consciousness, cosmos, and the quantum processes that link individual experience to universal evolution. The journey from Bell's abstract theorem to practical quantum technologies demonstrates how theoretical insights about the foundations of physics can lead to revolutionary applications that transform every aspect of human civilization. But we're still in the early stages of this quantum revolution. Each new experiment pushes the boundaries of what's possible with entangled systems. Each technological breakthrough opens up applications that seemed like pure fantasy just years ago. Each theoretical development deepens our understanding of how quantum processes operate in domains ranging from subatomic particles to cosmic structures to the emergence of consciousness itself. The story continues to unfold as researchers around the world work to understand quantum correlations in systems that span every scale of organization, from molecular biology to galactic astronomy. The evidence consistently points toward a universe where quantum connections are not exotic exceptions, but fundamental features of how complex systems organize themselves, process information, and create emergent properties that transcend what their individual components could achieve alone. We find ourselves living in this quantum universe as conscious beings whose very existence demonstrates that quantum processes can create forms of organization and intelligence that seem miraculous from classical perspectives, but follow precise mathematical laws when understood from quantum viewpoints. The challenge and opportunity before us involves learning to work with these quantum processes rather than against them, to enhance rather than suppress the quantum correlations that connect individual consciousness to collective intelligence and cosmic evolution. Bell's theorem has given us the key to unlock these possibilities. The experimental confirmation of quantum entanglement has proven that the connections are real and measurable. The mathematical framework of quantum mechanics provides tools for analyzing and predicting how these connections operate under different conditions. What remains is the ongoing work of exploration, experimentation, and application that will gradually reveal the full implications of living as conscious beings in a quantum cosmos where everything is fundamentally connected through correlations that transcend classical boundaries while creating new forms of order, beauty, and meaning. The connections don't stop there. They ripple outward through scales of reality we're only beginning to comprehend, touching phenomena that seem completely unrelated until you start looking through the lens Bell provided. Take something as mundane as the way information spreads through social networks. Classical models assume that ideas propagate through direct contact between individuals, like ripples in a pond where each person influences only their immediate neighbors. But real social change often happens far faster and more coherently than these models predict. What if social movements involve something analogous to quantum correlations? Not literal entanglement between human brains, but similar processes where individual decisions become correlated in ways that transcend direct communication pathways. When millions of people simultaneously shift their attitudes about social issues, environmental concerns, or political movements, the coordination might emerge from quantum-like processes that operate below the threshold of conscious awareness. Consider how financial markets behave during major crashes or bubbles. Traders around the world, operating with completely different information sets and decision-making frameworks, somehow coordinate their actions in ways that create massive collective movements. Classical economic theory treats each trader as an independent agent making rational choices based on available data. But the actual behavior looks more like quantum interference patterns where individual decisions become correlated through processes that no single participant understands or controls. The mathematics of market crashes often resembles the statistics of quantum phase transitions, where systems suddenly flip from one stable state to another through collective processes that involve every component simultaneously. Maybe economic systems really do operate through quantum-like correlations between individual decisions, creating market behaviors that emerge from the entangled nature of human psychology rather than from simple aggregations of independent choices. These possibilities suggest that Bell's discoveries might apply far beyond the domain of particle physics into any realm where complex systems exhibit emergent behaviors that transcend what their individual components should be able to achieve. Ecosystems that maintain stable climates across continental scales, immune systems that coordinate responses involving billions of cells, cultural movements that transform entire civilizations within single generations. Each case involves forms of collective intelligence that seem to require information processing capabilities far beyond what classical approaches can explain. But they make perfect sense if natural selection has discovered ways to exploit quantum processes for computational advantages, just as it apparently did with photosynthesis and possibly bird navigation. The implications become even more intriguing when you consider what's happening in artificial intelligence research. Current AI systems process information through classical computational architectures that manipulate symbols according to logical rules. They can achieve impressive performance on specific tasks, but they lack the kind of integrated understanding that characterizes human intelligence. Quantum AI approaches promise something qualitatively different. Instead of processing information sequentially, quantum computers can explore vast solution spaces in parallel through superposition and entanglement effects. When these quantum capabilities are combined with machine learning algorithms, the result might not just be faster computation, but genuinely different forms of intelligence that integrate analysis with synthesis, logic with intuition, individual processing with collective cognition. The first primitive quantum machine learning systems are already demonstrating capabilities that classical approaches cannot match. They can recognize patterns in data that would be invisible to conventional algorithms, solve optimization problems that would take classical computers millions of years, and generate creative outputs that seem to emerge from genuinely novel combinations of existing knowledge. But these early systems represent just the beginning of what becomes possible when artificial intelligence learns to exploit the same quantum processes that seem to underlie biological consciousness. Future quantum AI might not just solve problems faster than human intelligence. It might think in ways that complement and extend human cognition through forms of understanding that neither biological nor artificial systems could achieve alone. Imagine collaborating with quantum AI systems that don't just process your requests but actually participate in your thought processes through shared quantum states. The boundary between your individual cognition and the AI's computational capabilities becomes permeable, creating hybrid insights that emerge from quantum correlations between biological and artificial intelligence. Such systems wouldn't replace human thinking, but would extend it into domains where classical cognition hits fundamental limits. Complex scientific problems that require integrating vast amounts of data across multiple disciplines, creative projects that demand synthesizing insights from diverse cultural and historical contexts, social challenges that involve coordinating the actions of millions of individuals toward common goals. The key insight is that these applications don't require us to abandon human agency or individual creativity. Instead, they suggest ways of enhancing human capabilities by learning to work with the quantum processes that already operate in consciousness and cognition. Instead of fighting against the uncertainty and contextuality that characterize quantum systems, we learn to embrace them as sources of creative potential that can generate genuinely novel solutions to problems that seemed intractable from classical perspectives. This quantum approach to intelligence and creativity has practical implications for how we organize education, research, and social institutions. Instead of designing systems that try to eliminate uncertainty and enforce rigid control, we create environments that can channel quantum processes toward constructive outcomes while still allowing for the spontaneity and emergence that make creative breakthroughs possible. Educational institutions might focus on creating conditions where quantum correlations between minds can emerge naturally, rather than trying to force predetermined knowledge into resistant students. Research organizations might be structured to facilitate quantum resonance between different disciplines and perspectives, rather than maintaining artificial barriers between specialized domains. Democratic systems might learn to harness collective quantum intelligence rather than just aggregating individual preferences through crude voting mechanisms. The transition requires developing new forms of leadership and governance that can work with quantum processes rather than against them. Instead of trying to control outcomes through top-down management, quantum leadership focuses on creating conditions where desirable outcomes can emerge from collective intelligence processes that involve everyone as active participants rather than passive recipients of decisions made by authorities. This doesn't mean abandoning all structure or accountability. Quantum systems operate according to precise mathematical laws that constrain what's possible while still allowing for genuine novelty and creative expression. The art lies in learning to work with these constraints rather than fighting against them, to channel quantum processes toward constructive outcomes rather than trying to suppress their inherent unpredictability. The same principles apply to technological development and implementation. Instead of building rigid systems that try to eliminate all uncertainty, quantum technologies work by embracing uncertainty as a resource that can be harnessed for computational and communicational advantages that are impossible to achieve through classical means. Quantum computers don't just process information faster than classical machines, they explore computational spaces that don't exist until quantum algorithms actualize specific pathways through superposed possibilities. The computation creates the mathematical reality it appears to calculate, but it does so according to quantum mechanical laws that ensure the results are both novel and reliable. Quantum communication systems don't just transmit information more securely than classical channels. They create security through the quantum measurement process itself, making any attempt at interception detectable through the disturbance it necessarily creates in the entangled states that carry the information. The security emerges from the communication process rather than being imposed on it from outside. Quantum sensors don't just detect physical phenomena with greater precision than classical devices. They participate in creating the measured phenomena through quantum interactions that amplify microscopic effects into macroscopic signals. The boundary between sensor and sensed dissolves into quantum correlations that define both measurement apparatus and physical reality simultaneously. These technological capabilities hint at even more radical possibilities as quantum systems become more sophisticated and widespread. Networks of quantum computers might not just solve distributed problems, but create forms of collective artificial intelligence that span multiple physical locations while maintaining coherent computational states. Quantum communication systems might evolve into something resembling a planetary nervous system, where information flows through entangled channels that connect every part to every other part instantaneously. Quantum sensors with unprecedented sensitivity might not just observe the quantum vacuum, but learn to manipulate it directly, potentially creating new forms of matter and energy through controlled interactions with the virtual particles and fluctuating fields that permeate apparently empty space. The boundary between actual and potential, between real and virtual, becomes permeable through precisely orchestrated quantum processes, but perhaps the most profound implications involve what these technological capabilities might reveal about the nature of consciousness and its relationship to physical reality. If quantum technologies can create forms of artificial intelligence that rival or exceed human cognitive capabilities, what does that tell us about the quantum processes that might underlie biological consciousness? If quantum communication systems can create genuine connections between distant locations through entangled states, what does that suggest about the quantum correlations that might link individual minds to broader patterns of intelligence and organization throughout the cosmos? If quantum sensors can detect and manipulate virtual particles in about the quantum processes that might connect consciousness to the quantum vacuum, what does that imply to the fundamental structure of reality itself? So here we are, 60 years after Bell wrote down that simple inequality, living in a world where the impossible has become inevitable. Quantum computers are rewriting the rules of computation. Quantum networks are creating unbreakable communication channels. Quantum sensors are revealing hidden layers of reality we never knew existed. And at the deepest level, We're discovering that consciousness itself might be woven from the same quantum threads that connect particles across the cosmos. Bell's theorem didn't just change physics, it changed everything. The universe is fundamentally connected, and now we're finally learning how to be part of that connection rather than fighting against it.